When I made Witchboard, it was right in the middle of the slasher craze because I didn't know there was a slasher craze because I wasn't a horror fan. So yeah, I broke the mold there without even knowing because I didn't know there was a mold. But Joe Augustin, he liked slasher films and he wanted to write a slasher film, but he didn't like the mass killer with a knife, so he wanted something else to be the slasher. But it's not one killer doing it, it's them getting demonically possessed. And as your survivors dwindle, your antagonists grow. How did I come to direct Night of the Demons? I had done Witchboard for the same production company, Jeff and Walter Jostin, and we'd all done our first film together, which was Witchboard. And Joe Augustin wrote the script, Night of the Demons, which was called Halloween Party at the time.
We went out and we shot. We did a whole photo shoot with the severed head and did the title treatment for Halloween Party. And it was Halloween Party all the way through until we got, again, one of these E&O issues. We got a call from, I think it was Moshe Diamant, saying, you can't use Halloween Party because of the film Halloween. And I said, well, we have E&O coverage. And I think he said, quote, well, you may have E&O coverage on this picture, but if you don't change the title, you'll never get E&O coverage again. And so we had a friendly exchange.
I got a call maybe months later from someone, one of the producers, saying, the picture's sold, it's great, it's going out. There's just one thing, the title has changed, because while we worked on the movie, it was called The Halloween Party. Now it was called Night of the Demons, and all we have to do is just redo that one scene and change the title. Here's the problem. We barely had enough money to do it the first time. Plus, months had gone by on the motion control camera, so the chances that we would have to start over again from scratch were pretty good in terms of plotting all the camera moves and things, because things change, cameras get recalibrated and stuff. But the hardest part was the Oxberry we used was taken apart and shipped to Australia because it wasn't owned by the guys anymore. There was no way to actually reshoot anything. So what we ended up having to do was do an optical where luckily Night of the Demons was a much bigger title. So we made artwork up for Night of the Demons and matted that over Halloween Party in that main master haunted house scene with the ghosts flying in, which was really kind of involved. And as I said, luckily it was big enough to cover Halloween Party completely and integrate it so that way it didn't look like it was just something stuck on, you know, kind of cheesy. We wanted to make it look like we originally knew it was going to be Night of the Demons all along. I was a little disappointed when the title was changed. It came about because Mustafa Akkad was the producer of Halloween, threatened, I think, a lawsuit if we used it. He felt that we were infringing on the Halloween franchise. So, but the title itself I was actually happy with. I think that Kevin might have come up with it.
But there was a very conscious decision on all of our parts to make a film that was different than Witchboard. So I think there was a little bit of a macho thing about, okay, now we want to blow it out. We want to show what we can do with effects. Enough of all of the, you know, the drama and character development and all that stuff. And so Joe's script, and Joe himself, Joe Augustin, his being introduced to us really, you know, just played right into some of the things that we were all feeling at that time.
I mean, from the first moment I read the script and met Joe, he struck me as a really cutting-edge young filmmaker who knew his stuff. Everybody who he was connected to, from the guys at Propaganda, Yanni Savatson and Steve Golan in the early days of Propaganda, just his vision. I mean, all the great music that's in that movie, that was Joe's, his vision to put that great music in. The outrageous scenes, just the classic horror storytelling was all Joe. He did an amazing job. I loved that script from the moment I read the first word.
Now, Joe had a friend who himself was a director, and I can't remember who it was, but he was supposed to direct the film. This guy's script got picked up by New Line. So he decided he'd rather go direct his own script than direct Joe's script, so he left. And Walter, and then they were going to look for other directors, and Walter at that point said, "No, screw this. I'm not putting up with this kind of stuff. Let's just call Kevin. We know he did a great job on Witchboard. He's trustworthy, yada yada yada." And so they called me out of the blue.
But one of the biggest critics of Witchboard was Joe Augustin. For Joe, who's a horror aficionado, and also, to his credit, a guy who's like always been a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of people's tastes and understanding the zeitgeist. I think he felt Witchboard was a very old-fashioned film, and Joe's not an old-fashioned guy, and so I think that for Joe, like, it wouldn't matter how successful Witchboard was. Night of the Demons had to be completely different.
Actually, at first it was kind of a little shaky, not because Joe and I didn't like each other, but I think he was already feeling like he was on an island alone, and Jeff and Walter wanted the film to go this way and he wanted it to go that way. So then when they brought me on board, he just felt like it was going to be more of now it's 3 against 1.
I have a lot of respect for Joe, but we did not get along on the film. There was a lot of tension between us the whole time. And, I could go into a lot of reasons, but I think that in many ways that tension, we worked through it. And we were, I would also say, good friends at the same time.
I think we all got along pretty well. There were some ego bumping here and there, but overall, I think it was pretty smooth. I think Kevin did a great job with film, and I think the producers were great as far in sort of not interfering too much creatively and just sort of, giving us the support and letting us, make the movie that we wanted to make.
There was, a little bit of friction between Joe and Kevin at times, which you get from writers and directors. But I think the end result speaks for itself, and those two guys worked really, really well together at the end of the day, and we got a great product.
I think once he realized that I was kind of there to direct the film I wanted to direct, and Jeff and Walter weren't going to unduly influence me against him. And being a writer myself, I have a very high regard for the written word by someone else. I probably go out of my way more to honor what the writer wrote than most directors would. So a lot of times when Jeff and Walter would maybe want to change something for monetary reasons and they would ask me to change it, I would say, I would agree. I mean, it's not like they're unreasonable producers. But I would go to Joe and say, here's the issue, here's what we want to change. And then I would give him a chance to go mull it over and rewrite it and bring it to us. And that way it was his rewrite to accommodate whatever we needed to accommodate, but it was still him doing the rewrite, not me on the set changing stuff.
There were some serious changes that happened. There weren't very many, but the ones that happened were pretty major.
The first script I saw, he had it open with a priest who blessed the audience so that they wouldn't be affected by the demonic stuff they were about to see. And I said, I think that might be a little too cornball, so we nixed that. And then the only other big input, the only other two things that I really had any input on where was in the original script, Kathy Podwell's character Judy was dressed as Little Red Riding Hood. And I said, big red cape, Night of the Demons, that's going to come across demonic, and she's our heroine. Plus there were things that for me didn't make sense in the script, like they can lock the door and the house is possessed, but it can't unlock the door, but it can make the cotter pins come out of the door so that the demons can knock it down. So I said, rather than address all of these, because they were great scenes, and if you start addressing them logically, you might kill the tension and some of the cool sequences would be dead if we were going to go logical. So I said, what if we dress her like Alice in Wonderland, and then we're subconsciously saying, nothing has to make sense. That's the whole point. The house is just screwing with her.
Well, Alice, looks like we're all alone in Wonderland.
In the original screenplay, the surviving duo were Judy and her younger brother, who is in the film, but he plays a smaller part. That was done for logistics because it was for the budget, basically. It's expensive to have a young child.
What we did was, because we had a small budget, I sat down with Joe, and Joe was not just the writer, he was also the producer, so he did understand that, things have to change for financial reasons. We decided that rather than try to find a house that matched the floor plan of the script, and then a house maybe we couldn't afford, we were getting this great house for within our budget. We went back, he and I, and we walked through the house and we found specific rooms and hallways, and we said, how about if this is where this scene takes place and this is where this scene takes place? And then he went back and rewrote the script to fit the house.
The original ending was drastically altered. Originally, the house was surrounded by a wooden fence, and it involved an impalement instead of the ending that we have. But when we got the location, which was a great location, thanks to our location manager, Ed Parmalee, who did a great job, we had the brick wall there, so I rewrote the ending to accommodate that.
Don't you understand, Raj? We're dead. We've all died and gone to hell.
But the wall was only, this wide. But it was tall. It was like 9 feet tall. And it had, because it was in downtown LA, even though we do a matte shot to make it look like it's in the middle of nowhere, we're on the corner of like Vermont and Adams. So we're like downtown LA. It had barbed wire on the top. So at one time, maybe when the wall went all the way around or something, there was barbed wire. And we came up with the idea while we were standing there. I said, oh, what if the barbed wire was hanging down and they have to actually climb up the wall? And me and Joe were like, oh, that's great. Let's do that. So Joe went back and he wrote that, and that's how we have, the original climax was they climb over the fence. I think the fence was even like made of wood. It wasn't brick, it was wood. And at some point, I think Roger manages to shove like a spear or something through the wood and stab Angela when she's got Judy trying to climb over the wall. So once we had the brick wall and we had them having to climb barbed wire, and then we said, oh, they can all be hanging on her and he's at the top and they're pulling.
I think that that animated sequence is really ahead of its time. Now, I don't remember if the animated sequence was part of the original script. But I know that in terms of the execution, it had a lot to do with Don Robinson. And Don brought on a guy, I believe his name is Kevin Kuchaver, who, between him and Don, really boarded the sequences out and made that possible.
I was at the time in '87 working on the best Superman movie ever made, the Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, which is the one that will be remembered and cherished. A guy named Don Robinson was our connection to Night of the Demons. He came in one day, and I'm pretty sure what happened was Kathy, who designed all of the title stuff, we were dating at the time. And I'm sure that he saw some of her short film, Hide and Seek, that she was working on, and thought that it was really kind of cool artwork, and somehow came up with the idea to approach Kathy about doing the design for this low kind of budge, crazy, creepy horror movie he was working on called Night of the Demons.
I was working at Disney at the time, and I was an animator for Disney, and I had been at Disney for several years. And during this time period, I was working on The Little Mermaid, and I was animating Ursula. They used to call me the Queen of Horror because I loved working on the Disney villains. So many of the features there, like I did Ursula, I worked on Jafar and Frollo from Hunchback. So I love doing villains, and I love the whole evil thing. So my boyfriend, Kevin Kuchaver, came and he told me that there was an interest in coming up with a title sequence, which sounded really exciting because I was working in features at Disney, and you don't often get a chance to create something like that. So I was very excited about the opportunity, and being that it was horror genre, that was like awesome.
Because the idea was to have a certain number of names in the title sequence, just kind of the key people, Kevin Tenney and basically all the guys who usually in movies take all of the money all of the credit for everything. And so there was only about 5 people. But it was a limited number of titles that was talked about. And we, Kathy and I went over what was feasible and how we'd possibly do it. But she designed, I think, some inspirational sketches of some of the things that could happen and what the artwork could look like. And I think that she started to storyboard some ideas and sequences out as well.
Now, I must say that my inspiration was Night on Bald Mountain from Fantasia. I love. It's like one of my favorite animated pieces that Walt Disney Animation did. So I was inspired by that. And so I think, again, this was probably previs that I showed Kevin, Tenny, and the producers, and they loved the look of this. So then, again, we had to take some cells, which are clear pieces of plastic, and repaint that so it could be photographed under the camera.
I mean, our big concern for us was, would we really be able to get this, finish this in time for them? And their concern was, really, did we want to put this animated thing in front of this grisly horror movie? And I think that was kind of the decision that Kevin and the producers went back and forth. You know, yes, no, I'm for it, I'm not, you know. And I really think that once they saw some of the drawings and things, they realized that it would be a fun thing to add to the movie.
I've told this story before, even though it makes me look like an idiot. I was totally against it because we talked to people and it was going to cost a pretty penny on a very tight budget. I said, if we just do white credits on black, I'll have more money to shoot and maybe get an extra scene, or maybe we can even get an extra day of shooting. I don't know. But Joe really, really wanted it, and Walter really supported that Joe wanted to do it, and I was the naysayer. So they did a rough, and it was rough. But once I saw the rough and I could see where they were going, I was like, okay, I think this will look cool. I go for it. Yes, let's spend the money.
One of the things that happened was it went from maybe like 6 titles to everybody wanted to be in the title sequence. We kind of figured out, well, if each title cost this much money originally, which what we were getting, you just do the division, you just say each shot costs this much money, all of the people in the thing would cost this much money, and everybody on production thought that was a very, very funny idea and a very funny joke, and I think we still ended up doing it for the same amount of money.
The very last shot, we had to work into their live action. So their first shot was, I think, the car with a pumpkin on top of the car. How that pumpkin didn't fall off the car, I don't know, but you know, it's movie magic. So, so we had to take that live action, and I had to draw, I believe, a pumpkin to fit into that first scene. So, you know, that was kind of neat to make our title sequence work into their first shot of the movie.
The way we approached doing the sequence technically was Kathy would storyboard everything. Once they kind of approved what we were going to, what all of the sections were and all of the backgrounds and things were, Kathy drew them up as a master animation drawing on animation pegged paper. We then broke that down into different pieces for bottom-lit art. We dealt with it more like an effects animation process, where, as an example, things that were white would be painted. Everything else would be blacked out except all of the white parts of the scene. That would get one exposure. Then we'd add neutral density, wind the film back, do all of the gray things, wind the film back and do it, and then wind the film back and do glows. And a lot of this was happening on a motion control camera, a big Oxberry with a Tondro, old Tondro motion control system. So everything was repeatable. So we could do all of these multiple exposures and build it all kind of in camera. So rather than being top lit, just shot a frame at a time, we were constantly double exposing different pieces and different colors together. So it was really kind of a tough process. So I think just shooting alone took maybe a month.
It helps set the tone. It's like you see those opening credits, you know exactly what you're getting. And you're pumped and you're ready, because then Dennis, my brother, wrote that great rock beat score to go over those credits, and it's like boom, 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 and you're ready to go.
And it's cheeky too, yeah, in terms of, you know, it sets the tone, horror film, but it's going to have some a style to it that is different.
Which is great, because you think about it, then as soon as the credits end, you got 45 minutes of dialogue.
Relax. I just want to look good for the boys.
Linnea, everyone knew Linnea. I wasn't a big horror fan yet at that point. When I'd only made Witchboard. I didn't even know who she was, but she was already like a horror icon, a scream queen.
I think that after Return of the Living Dead, I started getting more horror scripts because I'd done a lot of horror before Return of the Living Dead, and I continued, in Premiere Magazine. I was Queen of the Bees, and I was on Rhonda Shear's Up All Night, and that kind of thing. So I think it kind of typecast me.
So everyone was like, well, Linnea, we should get Linnea. She's great. So she came in Red, and she was adorable. So it was like, yeah, okay, I get that. And then I found out later how big she was, and it was like, well, yeah, no-brainer on that one.
I became involved with the Night of the Demons in a really weird way. I got called in from my manager, and I said, I'm not going to go in because I was supposed to be playing a teenager, and I was, I think, 26 years old at the time. And I'd been on so many auditions where they said, oh, you're not, young enough. You're not young enough. So I kept saying no. And then they called me, and my manager said, they really want to see you. And I said, no, I'm not going in. And finally, about the fourth time, I went in, and on the spot, they hired me. So I was shocked.
And it was fun working with the cast because a lot of them, it was Kathy Podwell's first film. She actually was able to go in and quit her waitressing job because she got our film.
Kevin Tenney actually likes to tell this story that I was a waitress, and this wasn't my first job because I had already worked on a TV show and got my SAG card, but I was not a working actress. And so when this came along and I got it, I said to myself, okay, I'm done, I'm finished with waitressing, this is it, I'm going to be a full-time working actress. And thank goodness it was. So it was really the start of my career. So I give it a lot of credit for making me decide in my head that that's it, I'm done with waitressing. And it turned out to be true.
My impression was how young everybody was. Now, I was not an old man, but maybe I guess I was 25 or 26 or something. And every one of the cast members were very passionate, very cool, and they formed their bonds, and they were all in the makeup room. So it was like, they were like a gang, really together, and young and with tons of talent.
Now, keep in mind, I'm coming from New York. It's dead of winter, January, and I literally, I'm really broke, and I just decided, okay, let's go. Rent was paid for 1 month. I don't know what I was going to do after that, other than come back home, because I had a round-trip plane ticket. February 28th, the last day, I said, okay, this is it. I got to go back to New York. I didn't tell the agent this. I was just going to go back on the plane and tell him when I got back to New York City that something happened, and in the process, I just had to get back to New York. Emergency family member passed away or something like that. I don't know. I was going to make up something. The agent calls me that morning. They must have known something was up. And they called and they said, Alvin, we have an audition for you today. It's for film. And it just so happens to be already cast. And the role that's cast, they need to replace the man for, because he got a haircut and they don't like the way his hair looks now, and they want to see a few actors for the role. And I said, okay, and not thinking that I was going to tell the agent that I had a flight that same time the audition was. So I had to make a decision. Do I stay or do I go? And I decided to take the audition and pray that I would get this job, because if not, I would be on the streets, literally, in LA, homeless, trying to figure out how to get back to New York.
It was a last-minute call. I got a call. Kevin, I guess, could not find, I think there were 2 characters left, and one of them had to be pretty dramatic because, believe it or not, in this cult classic fun horror film that we have grown to know and love, there was a scene for crying and freaking out, so to speak, when I see an image in the mirror of the demon in the mirror, and you had to be able to cry on cue. So I went in that day, and I remember exactly. I read for him, and it was quite a lot of dialogue, and he called me, I think, the next day.
Before I did Night of the Demons, I had just got back from Rome, Italy, doing Ghoulies 2. So Charles Band. So I actually went from horror movie to horror movie, and I remember telling my mom, asking my mom, am I gonna be a horror film star?
Are you kidding? Betray my beloved sister for a measly quarter? What do you think this is? Some kind of depression or something?
I was 18 years old. I had $200 and a one-way ticket to Cali.
This is my final offer, kid. Now take it and sing. Where's the friggin' party?
My first audition was, the character's name was Billy. He was a New York street kid. You know, I had a diamond pinky ring that said Billy on it. I walked into the audition and I said, look, what does that say? Billy, go home. You know, I had big ones when I came out here.
Better be straight, Billy boy, or I swear I'm gonna come back here and kick your little ass.
Over the past year and a half being out here, you audition with the same actors over and over again, so it's kind of a tight group, and it was very competitive, and everybody wanted this part. And I remember it was down between me and my best friend for the role, so we were outside. They brought us back a half a dozen times, and I remember it was like the final audition, and he came up to me and I said, listen, bro, I can't talk to you right now. We're friends, but right now it's, you know, take your shoes for a walk. It's, you know, I was seriously focused on getting the role.
In that time, we're talking about the late 80s now, in all horror films, you always knew the one character that would never make it through. And it was usually the black guy, because the black guy always died within the first 5 minutes of the film. And that was true, actually. And the fact that my character survived, and not only did he survive, he was also the hero, was remarkable. So I love that. I said, wow, this is a whole new concept. I'm breaking ground here, you know. The first African American to make it in a horror film lives, you know, beyond the first 5 minutes. So that was true history in the making, and I was really excited about that.
It was nice to work with people who actually enjoyed being there and wanted to be there and got a kick out of being there. And they were just, I mean, the cast was great to work with. I liked working with them. I stayed friends with most of them, and even the ones I'm not in touch with anymore, we just lost touch. It's not like we're not in touch because we had a falling out or something.
You know, when we were growing up, one of the movies that we really liked was The Exorcist, and I had started mimicking the demon voice from The Exorcist when we were, you know, in school and whatnot. And so when this came up and they were getting ready to do all that, just thinking, well, what are we going to do? And Kevin said, you know, Jim can do demon voices. I'll bring him in.
I was in Hollywood in the early 80s, and I had the incredible honor of working as a professional jazz dancer, being a backup dancer for Donna Summer, Cher, Smokey Robinson, did a rock video for Sheena Easton. I think my famous rock video was for the Stray Cats, and started acting because my aunt, Rue McClanahan of the Golden Girls, was really encouraging me to be an actress. And I got this audition for this bizarre, crazy role where they asked me to be scary. So when I auditioned, I remember trying to scare the casting director. And rather than, you know, do it like this, I did it like this. Oh, darling, I guess I'm going to have to kill you now. Oh, delicious. I can't do the demon voice. When I did these conventions, we'll have contests to see who can do my demon voice. But in the scene where I'm saying, run, Judy, run, the only thing that's not real is that the voice is not mine.
I did them all. We just went in one day. It was, I think it took probably about 3 hours or something like that, but we just ran through the entire film, and as people get possessed, you know, I would just go in and do the voice, and we needed something to kind of make it, you know, a little bit bigger. So I remember, the glamour of Hollywood. We had a music stand, and we took a little trash can, one of those little white paper basket things, you know, stuck it on the stand, and then just put the microphone down in, and the screen would be there, and I could I would stick my face into this trash can and watch the screen. And as people talked or whatever, it would create like a reverb kind of. That was the big special effect at the time. But that's all we used was that, and I would just get down in there and just do all the dialogue for everybody. And then Kevin would have me do like improv stuff. It's like just improv this, improv that. But by the end, though, I was done. I couldn't talk. My voice was just completely trashed.
Mimi always gets mad at me for saying this, but she actually wasn't my first choice. There was another actress I just kind of just had a feeling about her.
Kevin didn't want to hire me for the role of Angela. He had another girl in mind who couldn't dance. And recently, Kevin and I had lunch in Los Angeles, and he formally apologized to me for trying to hire someone who was not a dancer.
Our casting director, Tedra Gabriel, really liked Mimi, Amelia. And Joe Augustin had written the scene with the dance in it. The script had the dance sequence in it, so we knew we needed someone who could dance, or we were going to have to double her or something. And Amelia had starred in a Stray Cats video called Sexy and 17, and she was the main girl. So he said, you got to see her dance. We saw the video, and she was like, great. And she was very sexy and very wild and just everything that Angela needed to be. So I said, okay, you convinced me. She's the better choice. So we chose her.
When I auditioned for Angela, my highest hope was that they would let me choreograph my own dance scene. This was shortly after the Flashdance era. It was a magical time to be a dancer in Hollywood. We were trained in professional ballet companies, and I was trained as a modern dancer. I graduated from Interlochen Arts Academy, and it was hardcore dance training. So when I was given the opportunity to do anything I wanted, I went, oh, not only am I going to be able to be as outrageous as I possibly can and get away with it, I'm going to be able to dance as wild as I want, which I did. But I was just doing that every night anyway around my living room. That's just what I did every night.
A haunted house is a house with ghosts in it, the spirits of people who've died. But the spirits living in a house possessed have never existed in human form. They've only existed in spirit form. They're pure evil.
This house, I don't know how they found it, was in an area of downtown LA that was really crappy. It was a terrible neighborhood. And it was a huge Tudor-style home that had looked abandoned. It looked like it had been boarded up anyway. I'm not sure when I got to the set whether they had dressed it or not.
And it was so cool. I mean, it was perfect. I was like, well, there's not going to be a lot of acting involved in this because this is really freaky and scary.
When you walked into this house, you really did feel like this was truly a haunted house. And at times I actually thought I heard noises. It was really spooky. It really had that kind of a sensation that, there was some kind of mystical element out there that you didn't want to touch or mess with.
It was scary, It was interesting because our dressing rooms we didn't have trailers or anything. All the dressing rooms were in the house. On each floor of the place, the actors were, my room was next to Stooges and Jay's, so I'd walk out of my dressing room and there would be Lance with his eyes poked out of his head, or Stooge would be in full demon burn makeup. It was a scary. It felt like one of those houses that you don't want to be in.
It was on a busy street, which is weird because it doesn't look like that in the film. In the film, it looks like we're up on a hillside in the middle of the country, but it's really on a busy LA downtown street.
I remember sitting outside very early on, smoking a cigarette, between takes, and this little old lady walked by me, and she just kept staring at me, and she's staring at me, and she told me, "Get out, get out." I was like, what the?
It had that feel like something was beyond the door. And you always were, if I ever found myself walking around by myself, I always was looking over my shoulder because I really did feel like something was going to jump out at me at any moment. It was really, they really recreated this haunted house.
There was one night after some bloody scene, I had to go upstairs to wash off the blood. And I went to leave the bathroom, and I heard somebody out in the hall. The boards creaked. And I was like, what the hell? Nobody was even in this section. They were in another section working. So I leaned against the door, and I hear, guys out there. So finally, I mean, it takes me a long time to work it up, and I open the door, and there's no one there. And so I look down the hall, and I realized the boards were running into the bathroom. So every time I stepped in front of the door, I was squeaking a board about 5 feet away.
I think they tore it down, but I wish they hadn't.
And I just heard last week it's no longer there. It's a Ralph's grocery store now. So that's like, oh, it was such a cool house. I wish they would have turned it into some sort of, you know, historical preservation, but it was awesome.
That'd be an interesting remake in a
Ralph's. Yeah. What happened to all? Yeah, the Ralph's is possessed.
And I did a lot of night scenes, so I was there all the time till like 4 or 5 in the morning till the sun came up. So, you know, being that you're there, your mind plays tricks on you. You're doing a horror film, and it does, you know, come into play that silly things would happen.
Being the adult professionals that we were, we would sneak off and hide, and then when someone else came in the room, everyone was jumping out and scaring each other.
And I felt like I was at a fraternity house, and of course USC just being right around the corner from there, it was sort of, you know, easy to just slide into that. Of course, most of the time we were there at night, so that sort of faded quickly, and then it did become the Hull House.
It was a big party. I mean, originally it was Halloween Party. It was the name of the film, you know, and that's what it was. It was just a party. You showed up to set. We lived in this house together. It was, you know, the beers that we drank. You know, the prop guys would fill them up with water, and I'd go out to the liquor store and swap them out for some real beers. And you know, it was the '80s. You know, everybody's running around we had a great time on the set.
You know, this is the problem. I have zero sense of humor when we're making a movie. You know, it's something I've worked on like all my life, but it's just like, would you expect the coach on the sidelines of a football game to be laughing and joking? Well, I feel like I'm the coach, and Kevin is like he's the quarterback or whatever who can joke. He's the gunslinger or whatever. I don't remember anything funny.
It was one of the best times I ever had on a set. And I think it was because we knew we were making something that was scary and gory, but also silly. And so we had fun. We were like, every day we were going to the Carnival House and going, you know, doing the e-ticket ride.
I actually popped out of a closet. So Kevin had me in a closet, and she opens the closet door, and I leap out. And one line out of all my years of acting, it sticks with me is, "Bodacious boobies, sis. If they keep on growing, you'll have to hire someone just to tie your shoes." That was the line that I mean, I could not tell you another line in another film or television show that I've done over 20-something years of my career, verbatim, and that is the one line that stuck. And I think it was because I was prepubescent going, wow, this is amazing. This girl's in a bikini. She was in like underwear, I think, and I did not see much skin. But I did see her in her underwear, so as a kid that age, I was like, whoa, yeah!
So the funny thing about that scene was originally, and this is going back to what I said about Kevin working with you as an actress and everything and being so chill. Originally, it was written, I think, that I was supposed to like be topless for a second or something like that. And I didn't want to do that. So I basically was kind of going to turn down the part and just, give up the movie. And Kevin worked with me, and he's like, okay, you won't do that, but let's come up with something, because I got, it's a horror film, baby. You gotta give me something.
The scene in the convenience store where I, give the guys a little show was in the script.
Let us take a moment, shall we? Wow, yeah.
Do you guys have sour balls?
Why, sure we do.
Thank God that she was our eye line at the time. A lot of times they just go sit in a trailer, but God bless her, because she's a trooper. And she's awesome.
It was funny because when I went to see the movie, it had been, almost a year since I'd seen it, and I was going to go do a tour in New York, so I went, saw the movie, and I forgot we had shot that, and that was the first time you see me. So it was like on the big screen, my butt. It was like, oh no. Luckily, I didn't bring my parents, and they said, "Who's that butt?"
Eat a bowl of. That was actually one that was added in.
What was that? Eat a bowl of
porridge? I don't remember. Pudding? Eat a bowl of pudding? I think it was pudding.
Oh, come on, let's hang out.
Yeah, eat a bowl of fuck.
Yes, eat a bowl of fuck. That was I stole that. That was a John Belushi line. I got that out of his autobiography, or not his biography. He actually got suspended from Second City for saying that on stage. He wanted to say it, and he had done it in rehearsals, and they're like, "You cannot say that." And this is back in the time when, you could go to jail for saying certain things on stage. And they're like, "You can't say it." So what's the first thing he says when he walks on stage? No, nothing. There's no opening, no scene, no nothing. He just comes out and says, "Eat a bowl of fuck." And is immediately suspended for like 2 weeks. So once I read that, I just went and just begged Kevin, "Please, let me say it somewhere." And he's like, "I know exactly where you can say it."
We did some naughty things that are now illegal, and we got away with it back then, back when making movies in Hollywood was still fun. I don't know if I'll get all these details right, but at one point, Philip Tanzini was missing his arm. So he had a bloody stump that was spewing blood. In these days and times, you're not allowed to drive through McDonald's or Burger King where you're going to pull up and have a bloody stump spewing blood. But of course, that's exactly what Philip Tanzini did. And it was just so much fun to have a cast that was playing practical jokes.
When they tried to get me to moon the old man instead of the pumpkin underwear, which wasn't going to happen. "No, really, we can't make out the pumpkin." That was the story. "We can't really make out the pumpkin. Can you just pull the shorts down too?" "Yeah, you can't afford it. That costs way too much. That's out of your pay grade."
Oh, jeez.
I do remember when they were making the smoke, and it could never be enough smoke, but yeah, we would come out of there and we'd be blowing blue boogers all afternoon, but it got the shot that we wanted to get, I think.
I've been a rock video queen for quite a while, so I was used to this huge cloud of blue stinking smoke that you had to try to operate through. But at one point, Kevin Tinney said to the cast, "Do you think there's enough smoke?" And Philip Tanzini put his finger up his nose, pulled his finger out, and it was bright blue. And Philip said, "Yeah, I think so."
I said to Kevin, "Okay, Kevin, if it all comes down that we have lung cancer, we're going back to the blue smoke."
I smoked at the time. I didn't care. It did stay with you for, a couple months. Every time you blew your nose, there'd be more blue. How is this stuff still in my body?
We would be breathing this smoke for a month straight, and at the end of every shoot, I'd go home and I would blow my nose, and I'm honest to God, it was blue, like 4 blows in, still blue.
I'd come home and I'd blow my nose and just blue. It was rough. Yeah, they should ban that. I think they have banned that blue stuff.
Kevin always says is that cookie is not allowed anymore. I saw it a lot in that era. Everybody used it, The whoever did it, I don't know who was responsible. I guess it was props that would generally do it. They always had the cast iron frying pan and a chunk of this cookie. And they'd light it on fire and blow it out like incense and then walk around with this frying pan while this stuff smoked up the room. And it was just beautiful smoke. And I liked it better. The stuff they use now, it's oil. So it just gets all over you and your skin and stuff, and the blue just gets in your nose.
Great. Barbecue made. No wonder she didn't keep the place clean.
And it looked so good. It just looked awesome. So, again, there's a problem. You want to give me cancer? Great, as long as it looks good. I'm good with it.
The kiss where the demon goes from me to her was actually just kind of, like any love scene or kissing scene or something kind of scary to do. And I knew it would be a little bit, people would talk about it a little bit, but she's a good kisser.
I didn't know at the time that making out with Linnea Quigley was going to make such a splash. But now that I know, I plan to do it as often as I possibly can. Linnea and I are doing a lot of appearances, and we're appearing at these conventions where we can meet the fans and sign autographs. And now that I know that people were just so blown away by my kissing Linnea, well, maybe I'll do it again as soon as possible.
And this was also at a time when, if I remember this, the AIDS thing was really huge, you know, and the scenes in which Angela, you know, kind of passes on her demonic ways to the others, and people were saying the way AIDS was spread, people were, you know, under the impression that you could get AIDS by kissing someone. So people really kind of took off with that, and people were, you know, really frightened, and it really worked. The whole thing worked for the time.
Going back and looking at the movie now, there's no CG. It's all, you know, Steve's makeup. I mean, it's everything you see was, you know, no screening, no CG. It's remarkable.
First of all, we spent a lot of time looking for a makeup special effects artist. And I think to Joe's credit and Don's and everybody's, we wanted to get the best. But the best didn't necessarily mean the guy who had done 20 films. It meant the guy who had like the chops and the creative vision. And, you know, being able to bring Steve Johnson on to the film was just a real coup for us.
I had just opened my own studio to do Smooth Criminal. I took a second loan out on my beaten up Trans Am. I had no money. I was a kid. I was 25 years old. And I thought, well, great. I've got $80,000, $100,000 to do this Michael Jackson thing. I can put down a lease payment on the new studio. This will be great. It's kickstarting my business. And then suddenly I get fired. I'm like, fuck, what am I going to do? And within literally moments, I get the call to do Night of the Demons. So it saved me. And it was ultimately my very, very first job, the first job at least that I didn't get fired from. Based on a lot of the films, the projects I'd done up to that point, Big Trouble in Little China, Ghostbusters, Poltergeist 2, a lot of these huge studio films, never mind what I'd done with Rick Baker and Rob Bottin, American Werewolf, Howling, all of those films. It was a smaller film at that time, but yet it was my first film. And so I was absolutely determined to make my mark. You know, I think the budget was a little bit less than $1 million, and so there were a lot of, shall we say, discussions with Kevin Tenney, the director, about how we should go. Because I didn't think it was Joe Augustin, the writer's film. I didn't think it was Walter Jostin, the producer's film, or Jeff Jeffreys, or certainly not Kevin Tenney's film. That was my movie. It's like, this is my breakout film. We're going to do it how I want it, the way I want it, when I want it, as many times as I want it, until, God damn it, I'm happy. So there were a lot of discussions about it. I remember quite clearly Kevin saying, Steve, this is not Ghostbusters.
He had done effects on bigger budget films, but as a second or third banana, this was his first time, like, kind of being the shot caller, running the show as far as the effects. And some of the effects were really, really ambitious.
And I remember sitting in some of the meetings and listening to these scenes being proposed and going, God, how is that going to work?
I went to a production meeting with Kevin and the producers, and whatever had happened, I think it was a timing thing where I wanted to create more stages for each of the demonic progressions. And they're like, Steve, this isn't Ghostbusters. They're like, we don't have time to shoot that. We've got a 4-week shooting schedule. And I was so outraged leaving, because again, I thought it was my movie. I came back, and I remember I went to my studio, and I literally stayed up all night sculpting every pore on Hal Haven's third stage makeup. I'm like, I'll show them, I'll show them, I'll show them, fuck them, fuck them, fuck them. And I just turned this makeup into the best makeup ever out of anger, out of absolute rage. That taught him. Okay, this isn't Ghostbusters. It's not a John Carpenter film. It's not a Boss Film Corporation film. It's a small independent movie, but yet it's my breakout movie. So what can I do? And so I broke down the script and I thought, okay, there's a couple of places to really show off here. One is there's a shitload of possession makeups. How can I make those really unique? How can I make them different? Because we've all seen The Exorcist. We've all seen a lot of these movies that were spawned by that have progressively shittier and shittier makeups. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm a big fan of Lon Chaney. And what Lon Chaney did without prosthetics, Lon Chaney Sr., is he would distort his features with tricks. I mean, he would let the face, come on, it's really elastic. People don't take advantage of this kind of stuff, right? And so I, on that film, came up with a really interesting trick to absolutely torture the actors. And I don't even know where it came from. I don't know what the genesis... Oh, I do too. Actually, I was doing tests for The Lost Boys, the Joel Schumacher, Kiefer Sutherland film. Of course, Boss Films lost the contract. But when we were doing tests, I would bring Kiefer in and think, Kiefer's a really good-looking guy. Joel Schumacher, being gay, wanted the vampires to be really hot. He wanted them to not get ugly. He wanted them to get more, and this was more attractive. That's the vampire thing, right? It's a very sexual thing. This is around the time of the Night Stalker. Remember him, Richard Ramirez? He's a good-looking guy, right? But he's a monster. He's a good-looking monster creeping into your house, destroying you. And so Schumacher and I got together and said, well, how can we take these monstrous good looks and translate them, overlay them onto all these really good good-looking young actors? And I thought, well, Mick Jagger's a really good-looking guy, and he's really talented, and that makes him even better looking. Now, and I broke his face down. I'm like, what makes Mick Jagger good-looking? And I would look in the mirror, and I would study myself, and I'd go, his lips. He's got huge fish lips. And I would go, well, I'm better looking like this. Look how much better looking I am. Look. And I'm like, well, how can I do that without prosthetics? Because that would be really a difficult and phony thing to do. And so I came up with an old trick that would have been something Lon Chaney would probably be very proud of, Lon Chaney Sr. I put silk organza, very, very thin but strong fabric, on the sides of the actor's face in Lost Boys, and then stretch their face like this, and put dentures in, which actually deform their face even more. Now, this is without prosthetics at all. So it really moves and it looks great. You've got no edges. It's like, holy shit, how is that done? So I stretched their faces back invisibly and Velcroed them to the back of their necks. And because, if you did this to an actor all day, they'd hate you. You could relieve it between takes. Well, of course, we didn't end up doing Lost Boys. And so I thought, one of the next movies I got was Night of the Demons. And I thought, see, it comes back to Night of the Demons eventually. And so that would be great to do on that. And so that's one of the things I did, is I distorted their faces without prosthetics sometimes, and then sometimes I would put subtle prosthetics on top of it. Contact lenses, teeth, all the standard stuff. One of the signature looks on the possession makeups, because, you can't really do a possession makeup without teeth and eyes, right? Everybody's been doing it for decades. So that's obvious. We do that. We stretch their faces. I'm like, well, what else can we do to make them look really good and really make my job as hard as possible? And I didn't really know until the first night. And the first night we had so many possession makeups to do, and each character, from Stooge to Angela to Linnea's character, Suzanne, had so many different stages. The first night, I'm just going, my hand is blurring. I'm going, brr, brr, just putting, dark splotches all over. I've got the appliances and I'm trying to paint them. Remember, these are the days without silicone. Silicone, a translucent material. So you're taking white foam rubber and trying to make it look like skin, trying to give the illusion of depth and translucency by blotching it up, putting blood under the skin. And the AD comes in and you got 20 minutes. I'm like, and I look in the makeup mirror and I look at this makeup and it's my first makeup. I'm like, this is a complete disaster. I'm going to make a complete fool of myself. This is my first movie. I'm going to make a fool of this. I can't do this. And so I thought, okay, how do I get rid of all these dark splotches? Because that was a bad idea. If I had 10 hours, if I was Van Gogh, it'd be fine. So I take a flesh coloring up and put it all over. I'm like, wait a minute, that's really cool, because suddenly you get layers. Where I put less flesh color, you still see the maroon blood spots. Where I put more, they go away, but you suddenly get layers and layers and layers. And it did become like an impressionistic Monet painting. And it was born of necessity. It was not planned at all. But if you look at each of the possession makeups, they all have this incredibly layered, splotchy makeup. And a lot of people have emulated that to this day. And I copied myself, from film to film, because it worked so well.
Because the characters would pop in and out of being possessed or not in one scene, we would actually have to break. Usually you break up a script and you shoot anything that takes place in this room, you shoot all of that together. Then you go to the next room, you shoot all that together. And what we would do is we'd shoot half the room with the character not possessed, and then she would have to go get made up for 5 hours, and we'd go to another room and shoot a different scene, and then when she was made up, we'd come back and finish shooting the scene here with her in her makeup. So our script was actually not just broken down by scenes, but it was broken down by makeup effects.
There are a lot of firsts in this movie. For me, it was my first job. It was my first wife. We haven't even talked about that. I married Linnea Quigley, which was really, really, really an interesting thing because, you know, there were a lot of sexy girls on that movie, right? I was, what, 26? It was like a playground. We're on a night shoot, so it was like everybody was out of their minds, everybody having fun. But I remember quite clearly, you know, when you do a makeup on someone, you got to be in their face, right? You're very, very tight, and you're doing these little spots, and you're doing the shadowing, and you're doing everything it takes to get the makeup to work. And typically, the actress will keep her eyes shut while you're doing all this stuff, right? But I would just find myself so in the moment doing this makeup, and like, Linnea's face is this close to me, right? And her eyes would be open, and I'm like, why is she staring at me? Why is Linnea staring at me? And I was like, does she like me? It was like a high school thing. Does she have a crush on me? It was so, so strange.
In Joe's script, when Suzanne is possessed, she coughs up bile and it lands on her chest and burns a hole in her chest, and then she shoves the lipstick through the hole. And I was not a big horror fan at the time, so I hadn't seen a lot of horror, but I had seen The Exorcist. And I said, they kind of did the bile. We're not going to top it. And I'd like to do something different. And I came up with the idea of what if we do something where it's, at first you think it's sexy. She's drawn. I'd been reading something about Renaissance art at the time and how the women used to use rouge on their nipples to make them really red, so they, you know, the hookers, so they would pop out. And I thought, what if she's doing that? And then we're all in the audience going, ooh, ooh, sexy. And then she just goes boop right into her nipple and everyone freaks out.
I think one of the things that makes that effect so startling, particularly for the time, 86, I don't know if the movie came out in 87, is that, you know, in those days you cut to the effect. You know, you have a wide shot, you cut in. You have a wide shot, you cut into the effect, and it's like, it's kind of obvious even subliminally to the audience that you're cutting into an effect. But Kevin and I wanted to do something very, very different with this. And having come off the heels of working with Rick Baker on Videodrome, I knew exactly how to do this. Because when James Woods reaches into his abdomen and pulls out the gun, he's literally, the camera's where you are, where this camera is, looking straight on, so you have no sense of depth. So we could build out a thick part of his body. James was literally going through, from the waist down, he was going through a hole in the sofa. It was an elevated set. So his legs were fake, his torso blended under his neck, and it got gradually thicker. So by the time it got to about here, he could reach in almost up to his elbow and pull this gun out. And so I thought, well, that's how to do this effect.
Well, it was a little confusing to work with the lipstick because I'm right-handed, and I had to left-handedly like draw a circle and go right into the spot that was cut for the lipstick to go through. So I had to like steady my hand to make this circle and go through the nipple. Under pressure, I was a little bit nervous, but it went great.
At this point, in 86, we still didn't have the silicones that we have now at all. But I really thought, okay, if the camera, as Kevin wants, is going to linger from a wide, slow-moving shot, a close-up on the nipple as this thing goes in, it's got to look like skin. I don't want to have to fake the translucency over foam rubber because it's going to scream foam rubber, opaque, it's not going to look real. And so I did something fairly unique at the time, and I decided, okay, we'll make it out of gelatin. Gelatin is, you know, we all know what gelatin is. It doesn't last, but, you know, we only had to be there for one shot, right? So I'm like, Kevin, we have to shoot on this night because if you don't get to it, you might as well eat it tomorrow because it's going to be melted. And so we glued it to her, it blended under her neck, and it just like the James Woods thing, it got a little bit thicker. But it really wasn't that thick because Linnea has very nice big tits. So we had to build out her breasts just big enough so even with the camera looking straight on, you wouldn't see that they're too thick. Camera moves into a close-up. Still, because I didn't want to build it out grossly, enormously, it wasn't just a matter of her own finger going into the false prosthetic, the gelatin prosthetic. It was a matter of making also a lipstick cartridge that collapsed on itself. So it's really a magic trick. So as she pushes it in, first of all, the lipstick cartridge is telescoping. So in 3 parts, it went became that big. and then her finger went all the way in. What's really magical about it is that in my opinion, is that the gelatin has such a memory that her finger goes all the way up to the first knuckle, and then when she pulls it out, the nipple seals itself. So, you know, in those days, these days people would just go, it's digital, right? There was no kind of connection to the effect, but in those days it was like, how the hell was that done? Because the audience knew that someone somewhere tricked them physically. So it was a really satisfying effect.
The Night of the Demons makeup was a living hell. So it took at least 6 hours, between 5 and 6 hours, to get on the possession makeup. Now that's only to get it on. It took an hour and a half to get it off. And after we shot all night, for them to be peeling these prosthetics off me, oh my goodness, it was miserable.
Hours on end in makeup, and even afterwards, because afterwards we're kind of walking around like zombies and in this costume, and you know, in my case, you know, she's got her thumbs and sinks them deep into my sockets, and so my sockets are gone, my eyes are gone, and my eyes are just bleeding out. The way that it worked was my eyelids were slightly swollen, and the blood coming out sort of prohibited any visual after all the makeup was done. I mean, you could see light and shapes and kind of know where you're at, but there are times when you're walking around bumping into stuff and you know, leave it to Phil to not let me know where things were so he could just see me trip and fall, and that was always fun.
Oh God, the demon makeup was horrible. I mean, it looked great, but it was like, I think on the last day of shooting where we all like come out of the house, it took a good 12 to 13 hours to apply it and paint it, and we started at like 3 in the afternoon and we got done like at sunrise.
Makeup process was pretty intense, but it really depends. I had 2 major makeups. One was, I don't know, Neophyte Demon, and then one was Burn Demon, you know? And Baby Demon probably took about 5.5 hours the first time. They got it down to about 3 hours. Burn Demon took 11.5 hours. Yeah, it was 11.5 hours sitting in the chair, and then we had to go shoot all night.
Nothing could have been more miserable than 6 hours in prosthetics, except 6 hours in prosthetics and then half your body gets burned off. So that was absolutely, utterly, unbearably miserable. And I was gooey and slimy and red and looked like I'd been spending a lot of time in hell. And it's real easy to act possessed when you're so incredibly unhappy. And I think all of us were so unhappy in that makeup. Oh, Lord.
And he had developed the makeup as a real burn makeup. It wasn't for the monsters. So when he developed the technique, and then he applied it to the monsters. So it was 3 different levels of makeup that had to be applied, of prosthetics. So he applied the first level, which was my normal demon head, a little bit distorted because of the burns. And then he applied a different level, and then he applied a 3rd level that he tore to get to the 2nd level. And so that's why it looks like it, you know, pieces had burned off.
Yeah, I think that the most difficult time of shooting in the entire film was at the very end, when they all come back. I mean, think about it. I was a young kid, and suddenly I couldn't do all those makeups for myself, so I had to lean on friends, and I brought in a lot of makeup artists. Even 3-time Oscar winner, Mr. Randall William Cook, who I'd worked with on Boss Film, on Ghostbusters, and all the long string of hits we did there. He won 3 Oscars now for visual effects for the Lord of the Rings films in a row. I think that's like a... Yeah, so Randall William Cook did some makeups for the finale in Night of the Demons. But yeah, I had to orchestrate a whole crew for that to get that done, because that was a lot of makeups. We had Angela and Hal almost fully burned, plus everybody else comes back from the dead. So that was a tough one.
One memory that I have in particular that I really like is one day we had to do a bunch of the demon-possessed zombie kids, and Steve Johnson called in a bunch of his friends who were, you know, great effects guys. But I was hanging out and had become friends with Steve, and he knew I had an arts background, so he actually let me play around and try to paint a face up. And I did it, and I thought I, did a great job, and I was really proud of it, and I thought it looked great. And then Steve came in, and he picked up his brush, and he gave it a little work over. I was totally humbled when he was finished, because he really took it, out.
I think having exposure to an artist like Steve Johnson on my second film really had an impact throughout my career.
The opening scene where right before my dance in Demons 1, where for the first time that something's a little bit wrong with me. Steve Johnson had put this gel on my fingers, and he said, okay, this is going to burn for 6 seconds before it burns through to your skin. So just put your hands in this huge vat of ice water after 6 seconds. So I had to time this perfectly so that when I turned around and said, I was just warming my hands over the fire, and I'm counting 5, 6, then the hands had to go into the ice water, or my fingers would have burned off.
Now tell me this, you mentioned a burn. I remember there is a pretty big fire scene, I think one of the demons. How do you do that indoors? You're in a real location, a house. How do you light someone and not just take the whole place down with you or black the ceiling? Do you have any insight?
Yeah, you got to fireproof the room you're doing it in and have plenty of safety guys with fire extinguishers. And we don't put gasoline on anything. We use rubber cement where we can paint it on where it pretty much stays where we put it. That's the reason we use it. If we paint an arm or a leg, it doesn't run all over the floor. So we can pretty much put the fire where we want. And we fireproof the room. Effects would put, I don't know, there's certain liquids, Zelgel, for instance, you could put on the roof or the walls if you didn't want it to burn. I mean, anything will burn if you keep the fire on it long enough, but at least it gives us a little bit of time to get the gag and put it out before the whole house catches on fire.
Rotten pig trash.
When the first Demons came out, it was shown in Mann's Chinese Theater, which is the most prestigious theater in Hollywood. In the history of Hollywood. This is where all the old movie stars walk the red carpet to watch all the old colossal hits shown for the first time. It was so flattering and such a surprise.
We went to see it at a theater because I just wanted to see what it'd be like to see a movie that you were in with people, And people loved it, right? They really did. But what surprised me the most was when they left the theater, people were going, that's Stooge. That dude right there is Stooge. I'm not kidding you. And I couldn't believe that somebody had actually recognized me.
That picture is really dear to my heart. After our experience with Witchboard and having to chase a distributor to get paid, we decided to put up our own P&A money and take the film out and see if we could get a start. So we put up some money, and I flew to Detroit, and we screened it for Mike Mahalich, who was the sub-distributor in Detroit, who booked all the major studios and pretty much everything in Detroit Mike Mahalich booked. And I remember him saying, after seeing the film, and my wife and I flew up, and we had this great meeting, and he was a big, tall guy, kind of like somebody you'd expect who ran theaters in Detroit, like a Teamster guy. And I remember him saying, okay, so how much are you going to spend in my town here to promote this movie? And I said, I remember it was about $80,000. I said, I'm going to come to town, we'll do newspaper, obviously, but TV, we'll do radio, I'll get on the radio circuit, I'll do interviews, whatever you think I can do, I'll be here for opening night, we'll sign posters, I'll see if I can get some cast to come. So he said, I love this. He said, this will work. So he then leaned over and said, okay, I'm going to give you 18 screens opening weekend, which was big for Detroit. And but if you don't spend the money that you say you're going to spend, I'm going to bust your kneecaps. And then he smiled, but he was serious. I guarantee you.
I, again, was blown away at the quality. What the shots looked like, what the set looked like. I mean, I knew that it was something special, like I said, as we filmed it. But I was blown away at the final product. I was like, this is no crappy-ass horror film.
I think, like, in a lot of ways, Witchboard is the more serious, and in some ways, like, for lack of a better word, the better film if you're just going to watch a film for everything that you want from a film. But I think Night of the Demons is the more entertaining film. It's the one that you can go back and watch. You watch Witchboard once and it's like, oh yeah, that was scary and I like the characters, but I don't need to see it again. Whereas Night of the Demons, you could watch and go, ooh, let's watch that again because that was fun. That's the roller coaster, you know. Witchboard is like the Hall of Presidents. It's cool, but you don't necessarily want to ride it 10 times. And Night of the Demons is the Matterhorn. Let's get back on that sucker and go again.
I think the first time Kevin told me that this isn't Ghostbusters, he knew never to say it again.